He wasn't supposed to be wrong, but the dog would not stop barking at the coffin. The rain falls in a thin, steady veil, the kind that soaks through wool and silence alike, turning polished boots dull and dark, turning grief into something heavier than words. And beneath a sky the color of old steel, they stand in rows, shoulders squared, eyes forward, while the Union flag rests perfectly folded across the coffin of Captain Arthur Hayes, a man they all believed they had lost, a man whose name now lingers in the cold air like a final breath that refuses to fade. And somewhere behind the line of uniformed officers, straining against a lead that bites into his collar, Rex lets out a sound that does not belong in a place like this. Not a whine, not quite a bark, but something deeper, something that cuts through the ceremony with a raw edge no one is prepared for. And a few heads turn, just slightly, not enough to break formation, just enough to notice, because military funerals are meant to be precise, controlled, measured down to the inch, every movement rehearsed, every emotion contained. Yet this is not controlled. This is not measured. This is something alive and urgent pressing against the stillness like a pulse beneath skin, and Rex feels it before anyone else does. The absence, the wrongness, the hollow space where a sense should be. And he knows, in the way only a creature who has lived by instinct and loyalty can know, that something is not right, that something has been taken or misplaced or hidden beneath layers of certainty that humans cling to. And he pulls harder, paws digging into the damp earth, claws scraping softly against gravel, his amber eyes locked on the coffin as if it might answer him if he stares long enough, as if it might shift or breathe or betray the truth it holds inside. And the handler beside him tightens his grip, murmuring under his breath, trying to calm him, but Rex does not hear the words, because words have never been the language that binds him to Arthur Hayes. It has always been scent, rhythm, the quiet understanding forged in moments when silence mattered more than speech. And as the chaplain's voice drifts across the gathered crowd, low and steady, speaking of service and sacrifice and honor, Rex remembers something else entirely, something sharper, something that hums beneath the surface of memory like a distant echo, the dry heat of a foreign land, the crunch of sand beneath boots, the steady presence of Arthur's hand resting briefly against his neck, grounding, reassuring, real. And that memory does not match this moment, does not align with the stillness of the coffin, does not reconcile with the absence he feels now. And so he barks again, louder this time, a single sharp sound that slices clean through the chaplain's words and leaves a ripple of unease in its wake. And someone shifts, someone coughs, someone glances toward the commanding officer as if waiting for a signal, for permission to acknowledge what cannot be ignored any longer. But the ceremony continues. Because it must, because protocol demands it, because grief is easier when it follows a script, and yet Rex will not follow it. He cannot, his body trembling with a tension that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with certainty, a certainty that grows stronger with every second he stands here, every breath he takes that does not carry the familiar trace of the man he was trained to protect. And he lunges forward again, the lead snapping taut, the handler struggling now, boots slipping slightly in the wet grass. And for a brief moment the world narrows to that single point of resistance, dog against restraint, instinct against order. And then the sound comes, not from Rex this time, but from the coffin itself, or perhaps from the hollow echo of rain striking wood, a faint, dull rhythm that could be nothing, that is probably nothing. And yet Rex freezes, ears pricked, head tilted just enough to listen, truly listen, as if the world has offered him one fragile thread of truth, and he must decide whether to follow it. And the air shifts, subtle but undeniable, carrying with it a whisper of something almost familiar, something buried beneath varnish and fabric and distance. And Rex's growl rises low in his throat, not in anger, not in fear, but in recognition, or perhaps in defiance of everything he is being told to accept. And in that moment, as the rain continues to fall and the ceremony presses on around him, it becomes clear to anyone willing to see that this is no longer just a farewell. This is the beginning of a question, a fracture in certainty, a quiet refusal to believe what lies in front of them. Because sometimes the truth does not rest where it is placed. And sometimes it takes a creature without words to remind the living that something beneath the surface is still waiting to be found. The rain does not stop when memory begins. It only softens, as if the sky itself is listening. And somewhere beneath the sound of it, Rex remembers the first time he heard Arthur Hayes breathe beside him in the dark, not as a stranger, not as a handler, but as something steadier, something that did not flinch when the world pressed in too close. And the memory comes not in words but in fragments, in scent and rhythm, in the faint trace of engine oil and clean fabric, in the warmth of a glove. But something quieter, something that required stillness and attention, and Arthur had trusted him with that, had trusted him not because he had to but because he chose to. And that choice had become the bond that now refuses to let Rex accept what stands before him. Because the man in the memory is not a shape in a box, not a still figure wrapped in ceremony. The man in the memory breathes, shifts, exists with a presence that cannot be mistaken, and Rex remembers the day the ground trembled beneath them, not violently, not in a way that shattered everything, but enough to send a ripple through the air that carried a warning only he seemed to notice. And he had stopped, body low, ears forward, and Arthur had followed without question, stepping back, trusting the pause, trusting the silence. And later there had been voices, movement, a change in direction that no one else questioned. But Rex had felt the shift, had marked it, had understood that sometimes survival is not about what is seen but what is sensed, and that lesson had stayed with him, had settled deep into the part of him that now stands in the rain refusing to yield, because the absence he feels is louder than any presence. And the coffin does not answer in the way it should. It does not carry the quiet trace of Arthur's existence. It does not hold the steady rhythm that once anchored him. And so he remembers the promise, not spoken in grand words, but in the small, unguarded moment when Arthur had leaned close, voice barely above a whisper, saying, "If I go down, you find me." And it had not been a command, not in the strict sense. It had been something else, something closer to a truth shared between them, and Rex had accepted it in the only way he knew, by holding it, by carrying it forward. And now as the present presses in again, as the rain continues to fall and the figures around him shift with unease, that promise rises to the surface, sharp and undeniable, and he pulls once more against the lead, not out of confusion, not out of distress, but out of certainty, because he has followed Arthur through silence before, has trusted what others could not see, and he will do it again, and somewhere at the edge of the gathered crowd, a man watches more closely than the others, his posture less rigid, his gaze not fixed on the ceremony but on the dog, and there is recognition there, not immediate, not fully formed, but enough to create doubt, enough to unsettle the neat lines of belief that have been drawn around this moment. And Rex senses it, senses the shift in attention, the crack in certainty, and his bark comes again, not as a plea but as a declaration, a refusal to accept the finality. Whitaker remembers a different morning, a briefing room filled with quiet voices and half-lit screens, where Arthur Hayes had once stood with that same unshakable posture, presenting information that others had dismissed, speaking not loudly, but with a calm certainty that made doubt feel misplaced. And Whitaker had trusted him then, not because the facts were complete, but because Arthur had never once followed instinct without reason. And now that memory presses forward, unsettling the neat edges of the present, and he steps closer, just enough to hear the handler's strained whisper, just enough to see the way Rex's eyes never leave the coffin, not for a second, as if looking away would allow something important to slip beyond reach. And the ceremony continues, though it has begun to lose its shape, the chaplain's words drifting without anchor, the gathered officers shifting almost imperceptibly, because something has changed, something small but undeniable, like a thread pulled loose from tightly woven cloth. And then Rex moves again, not forward this time but down, lowering himself, pressing his nose close to the damp earth near the base of the coffin stand, inhaling slowly, deliberately, tracing something unseen, and a faint sound escapes him, softer now, not the sharp bark that cut through the air before, but a low, questioning tone that lingers, and Whitaker's breath catches in a way he does not expect. Because this is not random, this is not chaos, this is a pattern, a behavior he has seen in the field when something does not align, when the environment tells one story and instinct tells another, and he glances toward the commanding officer, hesitates for a fraction of a second, then steps forward, his voice quiet but firm as he speaks, requesting a pause, and the word itself seems to ripple outward, touching each person present, settling into the space where certainty once stood. And for a moment there is only the rain, the soft drumming against wood, against fabric, against the silence that has grown too heavy to ignore, and the commanding officer studies Whitaker, then the dog, then the coffin, weighing protocol against something less tangible. Something that cannot be written into orders but can still be felt, and Rex rises again, turning his head slightly, eyes flicking toward Whitaker as if acknowledging the shift, as if recognizing the one person who has begun to listen, and then he looks back at the coffin, his focus sharpening, narrowing to a single point, and he steps closer, the handler loosening his grip just enough, uncertain now, uncertain in a way that mirrors the unease spreading through the gathered ranks. And Rex places one paw gently against the wooden surface, not scratching, not striking, simply resting it there, feeling, waiting, and the contact sends a subtle vibration through the stillness, a moment that seems to stretch beyond its measure, and Whitaker's voice comes again, quieter now, almost a question rather than a command, suggesting what none of them are prepared to say outright, suggesting that they look, that they confirm, that they do not dismiss what stands before them simply because it does not fit the expected shape, and the commanding officer exhales slowly, the weight of decision settling across his shoulders, and in that breath something shifts, something gives way, and he nods, a small motion that carries more consequence than any order spoken aloud, and the air tightens as those nearest the coffin step forward, movements careful, deliberate, as if approaching something fragile rather than final, and Rex does not move away. He remains where he is, body still, eyes fixed, every part of him aligned with the moment that is about to unfold, because he has known from the beginning that this is not an ending, that something within the silence has been waiting to be heard. And now, as hands reach for the edges of the coffin lid, as the rain softens to a whisper against polished wood, that waiting draws to its edge, poised on the brink of revelation that will either confirm what all have believed or unravel it completely. And Rex stands ready, not as a witness, but as the one who refused to turn away when the truth was still hidden beneath the surface. The moment does not arrive with a sound, but with a stillness so complete it feels as though the world itself has paused to witness what comes next, and the hands resting on the edge of the coffin hesitate for the briefest fraction of time, as if the weight they carry is no longer just wood and metal, but the fragile boundary between certainty and doubt. And when they finally move, it is slow, deliberate, careful in a way that speaks not of ritual, but of uncertainty. The lid lifting inch by inch as the rain softens into a faint whisper against the fabric of uniforms and the polished surface below, and Rex does not blink, does not shift, every muscle held in quiet readiness as if he already knows what will be revealed, and is simply waiting for the rest of them to catch up. And Captain Whitaker leans slightly forward, breath measured, eyes fixed on the narrow opening as it widens, as if the truth might escape if he looks away even for a second. And for a moment there is nothing, just the muted shadow of a form within, wrapped and still, exactly as it should be, exactly as it has been described, and yet something lingers in the air, something unspoken, an absence that presses harder now that they are closer to it. And as the lid is raised fully and the figure within is revealed, the silence deepens, not with grief, but with confusion, subtle at first, like a note played slightly out of tune, and Whitaker feels it before he understands it, the way one recognizes a familiar face that does not quite match the memory. And he studies the features, the uniform, the details arranged with care, and they are correct, they are precise, they follow every expectation. And yet they do not align with what he knows, with what he remembers, with the man who stood before him not long ago. And Rex steps closer now, the handler no longer resisting, no longer certain enough to hold him back, and the dog lowers his head, inhaling slowly, deliberately, drawing in the scent that should confirm everything, that should bring closure, that should allow him to accept what lies before him. But it does not, and his body stiffens in response. Not with fear, but with refusal, and a low sound escapes him again, deeper this time, carrying a certainty that no one present can ignore any longer, and Whitaker reaches forward. Instinctively, not touching, not yet, but close enough to see the details others might overlook. The small inconsistencies that begin to surface when doubt is allowed to breathe. The subtle difference in build, the faint mismatch in the line of the jaw, details that would pass unnoticed in any other moment, but now stand out with quiet insistence. And he exhales slowly, the realization settling in stages, each one heavier than the last. And he glances toward the identification placed carefully. Beside the figure, the tags that are meant to confirm identity beyond question, and something within him resists accepting them at face value. Because the certainty he once held has been fractured by the simplest of truths. The dog did not recognize the scent, and Rex has never been wrong, not once, not in all the years he has served. And that fact carries more weight now than any document or declaration. And the commanding officer steps closer as well, drawn in despite himself, his expression shifting from composed to uncertain, and the air thickens with unspoken questions, with the slow realization that what they are witnessing does not match what they have been told. And Rex lifts his head, eyes moving from the figure within the coffin to Whitaker, holding there for a brief moment as if to confirm that the message has been understood, and then back again, unwavering, and Whitaker straightens, his voice low but steady as he speaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet authority of someone who knows the weight of what he is about to say, and he suggests what none of them had considered possible until this moment, that there has been a mistake, that the man they are preparing to lay to rest is not the one they believe him to be. And the words do not echo, they do not need to, they settle into the silence like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples outward that cannot be contained. And for a long second no one moves, no one speaks, because to acknowledge it fully would mean unraveling everything that led them here. And yet the evidence stands before them, undeniable in its quiet contradiction, and Rex steps back slightly, not in retreat, but in resolution, his task in this moment complete. The truth no longer hidden, no longer buried beneath assumption and ritual. And as the rain begins to ease, as the gray sky lightens just enough to reveal a hint of something beyond it, the weight of what has been uncovered settles over them all, not as chaos, but as clarity, a single, undeniable fact that changes everything. Captain Arthur Hayes is not here, and wherever he has not yet been found. The silence that follows does not break. It deepens, settling over the gathered officers like a weight that cannot be lifted by rank or reason. And for a moment no one knows where to look, not at the open coffin, not at each other, not even at the ground beneath their feet, because the truth has shifted something fundamental, something they had all accepted without question, and now that certainty lies exposed, fragile and incomplete. And Captain Whitaker takes a slow breath, the kind that steadies more than just the body, and steps back just enough to take in the full scene. The rain easing to a fine mist, the muted colors of uniform and sky blending into something almost unreal. And in the center of it all, Rex stands quiet now, no longer pulling, no longer barking, his work in this moment finished, his posture calm in a way that feels deliberate, as if he has passed the weight of knowing to those who must now act on it. And the commanding officer clears his throat, the sound, small but sharp in the heavy air, and orders are given, not loudly, not with the force of command that usually drives action, but with a careful precision that acknowledges the gravity of what has just been uncovered. The ceremony is halted, the coffin is to be secured, identification is to be verified again, every detail reviewed, and the words carry through the ranks with quiet urgency. Men and women shifting from stillness into motion, though no one rushes, because this is not panic, this is something more controlled, more deliberate, the beginning of a correction that must be handled with care. And Whitaker turns his attention to the small metal tags placed beside the figure, lifting them gently, weighing them in his hand as if they might reveal more than what is stamped upon them. And he studies the engraving, the name that should belong without doubt, yet now feels uncertain, and a thought forms, not fully shaped but persistent, that somewhere along the line, something was missed, something overlooked in the haste to bring closure. And that thought leads to another, quieter but heavier. If this is not Arthur Hayes, then where is he? And the question lingers, unanswered but impossible to ignore, and Rex shifts slightly. Stepping closer to Whitaker, his gaze lifting, steady and expectant, and there is no demand in it, no urgency now. Only a calm assurance that what needed to be seen has been seen, and Whitaker meets that gaze for a brief moment, an understanding passing between them that does not need words, because he remembers, clearly now, the reports that came through weeks ago, the fragments of information that did not quite align even then, the signal that was lost too abruptly, the coordinates that seemed slightly off, details dismissed in the face of a confirmed recovery, and now those fragments return, sharper, more defined, fitting together in a way they did not before, and he straightens, turning back to the commanding officer, his voice low but certain as he speaks, suggesting that the last known location be reviewed, that the recovery operation be reassessed, that they do not close this case until every possibility has been exhausted, and the commanding officer listens, the hesitation from before replaced with a measured resolve, because the evidence is no longer abstract. It stands before them in the form of a mistake that cannot be ignored, and he nods once, a decision made, and orders are issued again, this time with clearer direction. A team will be assembled, the original site revisited, all data re-examined, and the quiet machinery of action begins to turn, not with urgency born of panic, but with purpose shaped by new understanding. And as the officers disperse into their roles, the structure of the moment begins to shift, no longer a farewell, but the beginning of something unfinished, something that demands continuation, and Rex remains where he is for a moment longer, watching, listening, as if ensuring that the path forward has truly been set, and then, slowly, he lowers himself to the damp ground, the tension finally easing from his body, not into rest, but into readiness, because this is not the end of his task, it is only a transition, and somewhere beyond the quiet grounds of this interrupted ceremony, beyond the gray sky and the fading rain, there is a trail that has not yet gone cold, a presence that has not yet been found, and Rex knows it in the way. He has always known, not through instruction or proof, but through the absence that first called him to act, and as the last of the rain fades into a distant hush, leaving only the soft rustle of wind through fabric and grass, the truth settles fully into place, not as a conclusion, but as a beginning. Captain Arthur Hayes is still out there, and this time, they are finally ready to find him. The following morning does not arrive with sunlight, but with a pale, muted glow that filters through low clouds, turning the world into shades of gray and silver, and the air carries a quiet chill that lingers against skin and fur alike, as if the night has not fully released its hold. And within the operations room, the atmosphere is different from the stillness of the ceremony. It is tighter, more focused, every movement deliberate, every voice measured, and Captain Whitaker stands at the center of it, sleeves rolled, eyes scanning the spread of maps and reports laid across the long table, each document a fragment of a story that now refuses to remain closed, and Rex lies nearby, not resting, not entirely, but watching, his head low, ears attentive, following the subtle shifts in tone and movement that signal importance, and the room smells faintly of paper, ink, and something sharper beneath it, the tension of minds working to correct what should never have been mistaken, and Whitaker traces a line across the map with his finger, following coordinates that had once been marked as final, as resolved, and now feel incomplete, and he pauses at a point just beyond the original recovery site, a small detail, almost overlooked, where the terrain shifts slightly, where a path could have been missed if one was not looking for it, and he leans back slightly, considering, while voices around him offer data, times, distances measured in kilometers, weather conditions noted and filed, each piece adding shape to the uncertainty, and yet it is not the numbers that guide him, not entirely. It is the memory of Arthur Hayes, the way he had always moved with intention, the way he had trusted instinct when logic faltered, and Whitaker knows, with a quiet certainty that mirrors the dog beside him, that Arthur would not have stopped where they believed he had, that he would have kept moving, would have found another way, and that thought shifts the entire map in his mind, not physically, but in meaning, and Rex rises slowly, as if sensing the change, stepping closer to the table, nose lifting slightly, drawing in the scent of paper and ink, not because it holds the answer, but because it carries the trace of decision. And Whitaker glances down at him, a brief moment of acknowledgement passing between them, before turning back to the others, his voice steady as he speaks, suggesting a revised search pattern, extending beyond the original perimeter, following the terrain as it would be navigated by someone who knows how to survive, someone who does not wait to be found but moves to be seen. And there is a pause, not of disagreement, but of recalibration, as the team adjusts to this new direction. And then the room shifts, subtle but undeniable, as focus aligns with purpose, and plans begin to take form, vehicles prepared, equipment checked, routes assigned. And through it all, Rex remains close, not interfering, not restless, simply present, as he has always been, a constant in a moment that has begun to move again. And as the preparations reach their quiet peak, Whitaker gathers the final reports, folding them neatly, his movements precise, controlled, before stepping toward the door, the weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders not as burden, but as something accepted, something necessary. And outside, the air feels different, the mist lifting just enough to reveal the outline of the landscape beyond, fields stretching into distance, edges softened by the lingering damp, and the vehicles wait in a loose line, engines silent, ready, and Rex moves ahead without command, stepping onto the gravel with a quiet confidence that draws a few glances, not of doubt now, but of recognition, because the role he plays is no longer questioned, it is understood. And Whitaker follows, pausing only briefly to look back at the building behind them, at the place where certainty had been undone and replaced with something truer, something harder to ignore. And then he steps forward, joining the others, and the engines come to life one by one, a low hum that builds steadily, not loud, not aggressive, but purposeful. And as they begin to move, tires rolling over damp ground, leaving faint tracks that will fade with time, the sense of direction becomes clear, not just in route, but in intent. They are not returning to what was known. They are moving toward what was missed. And Rex stands at the back of the lead vehicle, steady, balanced, eyes fixed ahead, as if he can already see beyond the horizon, beyond the mist and the distance, to the place where the trail begins again. And as the convoy moves out, leaving behind the quiet grounds of the interrupted farewell, the story shifts once more, not toward an ending, but toward a search guided not by certainty, but by trust. And in that trust, something stronger than doubt begins to take hold, because somewhere out there, beyond the lines drawn on maps and the conclusions once accepted, Captain Arthur Hayes is still part of this world, and this time, they are following the one guide who never stopped believing it. The road stretches ahead in a long, muted ribbon of damp tarmac, bordered by hedgerows heavy with rain, and the convoy moves through it with a steady rhythm that feels less like travel and more like intention, each vehicle maintaining distance, each turn taken without hesitation, and inside the lead vehicle Rex remains still, not rigid, not tense, but focused in a way that seems to draw the world into a narrower frame, his gaze fixed beyond the windscreen where the mist curls and shifts with the passing air, and Captain Whitaker sits beside the driver, one hand resting lightly against the dashboard, not for balance but as a quiet anchor, his mind moving through possibilities that now feel less like speculation and more like direction. And the map folded on his lap holds less importance than it did an hour ago, because the route they follow is no longer defined solely by coordinates. It is shaped by something less visible, something that cannot be plotted but can still be trusted. And as the convoy leaves the paved road and turns onto a narrower track, gravel crunching softly beneath tires, the landscape begins to change, the fields giving way to rougher ground, patches of uneven earth and low brush stretching out in muted greens and browns. And the air carries a different scent here, damp soil, distant water, something older, something less disturbed. And Rex lifts his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he draws it in, not searching yet, not fully, but marking it, aligning it with something stored deep within memory. And Whitaker notices the shift, subtle as it is, the way the dog's posture adjusts, the way his attention sharpens, and he signals for the convoy to slow, the vehicles easing into a lower pace. engines softening to a low hum that blends with the quiet of the land around them. And when they come to a stop, the silence that follows is different from the one at the ceremony. This is not heavy, not burdened. It is open, expectant, as if the ground itself is waiting to be read, and Rex moves first, stepping down onto the damp earth with measured precision, Paws pressing into soil that yields slightly under his weight, and he pauses there, still, listening in the way only he can, filtering the subtle layers of scent and sound that drift through the air, and then he moves forward, slow at first, tracing a line that no one else can see, nose low, body aligned with purpose, and the team follows at a respectful distance, not crowding, not interrupting, because they understand now that this is not a task that can be forced. It must unfold in its own time, and Whitaker walks a few paces behind Rex, his steps careful, eyes scanning not just the ground but the horizon, the shape of the land, the way it might guide or conceal, and the minutes stretch, not long, not short, just enough to allow the rhythm to settle, and then Rex stops, not abruptly, not with tension, but with a quiet certainty that draws all attention to that single point, and he lowers his head again, inhaling more deeply this time, tracing a small arc in the earth as if confirming what he has found, and Whitaker steps closer, crouching slightly, his gaze following the line of Rex's movement, and at first there is nothing obvious, just soil, slightly darker in one place, slightly disturbed, but not in a way that would stand out to an untrained eye. And yet the way Rex holds his position, the way he does not move on, speaks louder than any visible sign, and Whitaker feels the same shift he felt at the Coffin, that quiet alignment between instinct and understanding, and he signals to the others, a small motion of the hand that brings them closer, not hurried, not tense, but focused, and as they gather, the air seems to draw in around them, narrowing to the space where Rex stands, and one of the team kneels, brushing aside the top layer of damp soil with careful fingers, revealing beneath it a faint impression, not clear, not perfect, but enough to suggest movement, enough to hint at a path that was not meant to be followed, and Whitaker exhales slowly, the realization settling in stages, not with shock, but with confirmation, because this is what they came for, not proof of loss, but evidence of continuation, and Rex lifts his head, turning slightly toward Whitaker, not seeking approval, not asking, simply acknowledging that the trail has begun, and in that moment, the search changes shape again, no longer a question of where to look, but how far they are willing to follow, and Whitaker rises, his voice low but steady as he gives the next instruction, the team spreading out just enough to support the line Rex has found, not overtaking it, not disrupting it, but reinforcing it, and as they begin to move again, step by careful step, the landscape seems to shift with them, the mist thinning just enough to reveal more of the ground ahead, the path unfolding not in certainty, but in possibility, and Rex leads, not quickly, not urgently, but with a quiet confidence that carries them forward, because somewhere beyond the reach of what they can yet see, the truth they uncovered has already begun to take form, and with each measured step, they move closer to it, guided by the one presence that never lost the trail, even when the world believed it had ended. The ground does not give answers easily. It yields them in fragments, in quiet signs that demand patience rather than force, and Rex moves through it with that patience, step by measured step, his nose close to the earth, tracing a path that seems invisible to everyone else, yet undeniable in the way it holds his focus, and the team follows with a careful rhythm, boots pressing into soft soil, the faint sound of movement carried away by the open air, and Captain Whitaker keeps his distance just enough to observe, not to interfere, because he understands now that the smallest disruption could blur what they are trying to uncover, and the trail they follow begins to stretch further than expected, bending slightly with the shape of the land, leading them toward a shallow dip where the ground darkens and the scent of moisture grows stronger, and the mist that once hovered lightly now gathers more densely in that direction, curling low against the surface as if it, too, is being drawn towards something unseen, and Rex slows, not hesitating, but adjusting, his movements becoming more deliberate, more precise, each step placed with care as he navigates the subtle shifts in scent that weave through the air, and Whitaker notices the change, the way the dog's body lowers slightly, The way his tail steadies into a line that signals concentration rather than motion, and he raises a hand, signaling the others to hold back, to give space, because whatever lies ahead requires clarity, not noise, and the team responds without question, spreading just enough to maintain visibility while allowing the center to remain undisturbed, and the silence deepens again, not heavy, not oppressive, but focused, like the moment before something becomes clear, and Rex reaches the edge of the dip and pauses, lifting his head, drawing in a longer breath, as if confirming what the ground has already told him. And then he steps down, slowly, carefully, his paws sinking slightly into softer earth, and the air changes there, cooler, carrying a faint trace of something that does not belong to the natural rhythm of the place, something human, something recent enough to linger, and Whitaker feels it too, not in scent, but in instinct. The same quiet signal that had guided him to listen at the ceremony, and he steps closer, crouching at the edge, his eyes scanning the ground below, and at first it appears unchanged, just damp soil and scattered brush, but then he sees it, not clearly, not in a way that draws immediate attention, but in the subtle disruption of pattern, a line where the grass does not sit quite right, a patch where the earth has been pressed differently, and he exhales slowly, the recognition settling in, and Rex moves along that line, following it with unwavering focus, his body aligning with its direction, and the path begins to take shape, not as a defined track, but as a sequence of small disturbances that connect into something meaningful when seen together, and the team adjusts accordingly, stepping with care, avoiding the center, preserving what remains, and Whitaker rises, his voice low as he speaks, confirming what they are beginning to understand, that this is movement, deliberate and sustained, not random, not lost, but purposeful. And that changes everything, because it means Arthur Hayes did not stop, did not remain where they believed. He moved, he continued, he chose a direction, and that direction is now before them, faint but real, and Rex pauses again, turning his head slightly, listening, as if the land itself might offer more than scent, and for a moment the only sound is the distant rustle of wind across the open field, the soft shift of fabric against uniform, and then he steps forward once more, leading them further into the dip, where the ground narrows and the brush thickens just enough to obscure the view beyond, and Whitaker follows, each step measured, each breath steady, because the sense of proximity grows stronger here, not in distance measured by kilometers, but in presence, in the quiet certainty that they are no longer searching blindly. They are following something real, something that has not yet faded, and as they move through the narrowing space, the mist parts slightly, revealing ahead a small rise, uneven but passable, and Rex heads toward it without hesitation, his pace steady, his focus absolute, and Whitaker feels it then, a shift not just in the landscape, but in the weight of the moment, as if they are crossing from uncertainty into something more defined. And when Rex reaches the base of the rise, he stops once more, lifting his head higher this time, drawing in the air rather than the ground, and his posture changes, subtle but unmistakable, from tracking to recognition, and Whitaker steps beside him, eyes following the direction of his gaze. And though he cannot yet see what Rex senses, he understands that they are close, closer than they have been since this search began, and the air holds that quiet tension again, not of doubt, but of anticipation, as if the next step will bring them to the edge of something that is waited to be found. And Rex stands there, steady, certain, his presence a constant in a moment that is about to unfold, because the trail has led them here for a reason, and whatever lies beyond that rise is no longer hidden, it is simply waiting for them to see it. Rex does not move at first, not because he is uncertain, but because the moment has narrowed to something too precise for haste, his body still at the base of the rise, ears forward, breath slow and measured as he listens to something beyond the reach of human sense, and Captain Whitaker stands beside him, eyes fixed ahead, trying to follow that invisible line of awareness, and the mist shifts again, thinner now, drawn aside by a faint current of air that carries with it a trace so subtle it would pass unnoticed to anyone else. Yet Rex responds instantly, his posture lifting, his weight shifting forward, not in pursuit, not in urgency, but in recognition, and he steps up onto the rise with quiet certainty, Paws finding steady ground among the uneven earth, and the team follows, slower, careful not to break the fragile clarity that has brought them this far. And as they crest the rise, the landscape opens slightly, revealing a stretch of ground that dips again into a narrow hollow bordered by low brush and scattered stones. And at first it seems empty, nothing more than a continuation of the same muted terrain, but Rex does not hesitate. He moves down into it, his pace steady, his focus unwavering, and Whitaker feels it then, a shift in the air, not dramatic, not obvious, but present, like the faint warmth of something that has not yet faded, and he descends after the dog, boots sinking slightly into softer soil, his breath held without realizing it. And the hollow carries a different silence, one that feels less open, more contained, as if sound itself lingers here a moment longer before dispersing, and Rex slows again, his head lifting higher this time, nostrils flaring as he draws in the air rather than the ground, and a low sound escapes him. Not the warning from before, not the sharp declaration, but something quieter, almost uncertain, as if the line between absence and presence has begun to blur, and Whitaker steps closer, scanning the space ahead. And then he sees it, not immediately, not in full, but in the faint outline of something that does not belong to the natural shape of the land, a form partially obscured by brush, low to the ground, still, and he raises a hand instinctively, signaling the others to hold back, to let this moment unfold without intrusion, and Rex moves forward. Again, slower now, each step placed with care, as if approaching something fragile rather than distant, and the air tightens around them, the quiet deepening into something almost reverent. And when Rex reaches the edge of the form, he stops, standing still, head slightly lowered, ears forward, listening, waiting, and Whitaker closes the distance by a few careful steps, his eyes adjusting to the shape before him, the details resolving slowly. Fabric, movement, the faintest rise and fall that might be mistaken for the shifting of air, but is not, and his breath catches, not in shock, not in fear, but in recognition of something that should not be possible, and yet is, and he lowers himself slightly, his voice barely above a whisper as he speaks a name that has not yet been laid to rest. And for a moment there is no response, no movement beyond the subtle rhythm already there. And Rex takes one final step forward, lowering himself beside the figure, his head tilting, his nose drawing close but not touching, as if confirming what he already knows. And then the smallest change occurs, so slight it could be missed if not watched with complete attention, a shift in breath, a faint adjustment, and Whitaker exhales slowly, the weight of the search settling into something else entirely, not conclusion, not yet, but confirmation, and he turns his head just enough to meet the gaze of the nearest team member, the unspoken message clear, they have found him, and yet no one moves quickly, no one rushes forward, because this moment is not about urgency, it is about presence, about recognizing that what was thought lost has endured in a way that defies expectation, and Rex remains where he is. Close, steady, his body relaxed now in a way it has not been since the ceremony, as if the tension that held him has finally released into something quieter, something complete, and Whitaker reaches forward slowly, careful, respectful, not to disturb, not to overwhelm, but simply to confirm what stands before him. And as his hand hovers just above the fabric, he feels it, not through touch, but through the subtle warmth that lingers in the air, the unmistakable sign of life that no report could capture. And he closes his eyes for the briefest moment, a silent acknowledgement of the path that led them here, of the instinct that was trusted when doubt was easier. And when he opens them again, the world feels different, not changed entirely, but shifted just enough to reveal what was hidden. And Rex lifts his head, looking toward Whitaker with a quiet steadiness, as if to say the promise has been kept. And in that look there is no triumph, no relief that needs to be spoken, only the calm certainty of something that was never truly lost, only waiting to be found. For a moment, no one speaks, because to move too quickly would feel like breaking something sacred, something that has taken every ounce of trust to reach. And Captain Whitaker keeps his hand suspended just above the fabric, feeling the faint warmth that lingers there, not imagined, not hoped for, but real in the quietest, most undeniable way. and he lowers it gently, not to disturb, not to impose, but simply to confirm what Rex has already known since the beginning. And beneath his touch there is a subtle response, not a movement in the way one expects, but a presence, a living rhythm that does not belong to memory or ceremony. And he exhales slowly, the weight of uncertainty lifting in a way that feels almost fragile, as if it could return if handled too abruptly. And he turns slightly, his voice low but steady as he calls for assistance. Not urgent, not alarmed, but precise, controlled, because this is no longer a search. This is a recovery of something that was never meant to be lost. And the team responds with the same careful intention, moving closer, kneeling, assessing without haste, each action, measured to preserve the moment rather than rush through it. And Rex remains beside Arthur Hayes, his body close but not pressing, his head lowered in a quiet vigil that speaks more clearly than any command. And when Arthur's breathing shifts again, just slightly, just enough to be seen by those who now know where to look, the air changes, not with shock, but with a deep, collective understanding that something extraordinary has unfolded in silence. And Whitaker watches closely, his focus narrowing to the smallest details, the rise and fall, the faint tension easing from Arthur's frame, the signs that life has endured where it was not expected to. And he speaks again, softer this time, calling Arthur's name not as a command, not as an order, but as a presence reaching out to another. And for a moment there is no response. And then, slowly, as if drawn back from a distance too far to measure, Arthur stirs, not fully, not with sudden clarity, but with the quiet, undeniable shift of someone returning. And Rex lifts his head at once, his ears forward, his body aligning with that movement, and a sound escapes him, not loud, not sharp, but low and steady, a recognition, a reassurance. And Arthur's hand moves, barely at first, fingers adjusting against the ground as if remembering how. And Whitaker leans closer, his voice steady, grounding, guiding, and the team holds their positions, allowing the moment to unfold without pressure, without demand, because this is not something that can be forced. It must come in its own time. And as Arthur's eyes begin to open, slowly, carefully, the world returns to him in fragments, light, shadow, the outline of figures, the presence beside him that has never left. And Rex shifts closer, just enough that Arthur can feel him, can recognize the warmth, the familiar weight of something that has always been there. And in that contact something settles, something anchors, and Arthur's gaze steadies, finding Rex first, before anything else. And there is no confusion in that moment, no question, only recognition, deep and immediate, as if no time has passed at all. And Whitaker watches it unfold with a quiet stillness, understanding that what he is witnessing goes beyond recovery, beyond procedure. It is the restoration of a bond that never broke, only waited. And he steps back slightly, giving space, allowing that connection to hold without interruption. And the team continues their work around them, careful, respectful, ensuring that Arthur is supported, that he is safe, that the path forward is secured. But at the center of it all, Rex remains, his presence constant, his body finally at ease, not because the task is finished, but because the promise has been fulfilled. And Arthur's hand rests against his fur, the motion small, unsteady, but certain. And in that touch there is no need for words, no need for explanation, because everything that needed to be said has already been carried through silence, through distance, through doubt. And as the mist begins to lift around them, revealing the wider landscape that once concealed this moment, the truth settles fully into place, not as a revelation that shocks, but as one that restores. And Whitaker looks out across the field, his breath steady, his mind already moving toward what comes next, the reports to be corrected, the story to be rewritten, the certainty to be rebuilt on what has now been proven. But beneath all of that, there is something quieter, something that will remain long after the details are resolved. The understanding that sometimes the truth does not lie in what is seen or what is told, but in what refuses to be ignored. And as Rex lowers himself beside Arthur once more, his body relaxed, his eyes still watchful, the moment holds, not as an ending, but as a quiet return to something that was never truly gone. The movement that follows is careful, almost reverent, as if the ground itself must be respected for what it has held. And the team works with quiet coordination, hands steady, voices low, ensuring that Arthur Hayes is supported without disrupting the fragile return he has just made. And Captain Whitaker remains close, but not overbearing, his presence measured, allowing space for both the professionals and the moment itself. Because he understands that what matters now is not speed but stability, not urgency, but care. And Rex does not leave Arthur's side, not even when others draw nearer, his body positioned just within reach, his gaze shifting between the faces around them and the man he never stopped following. And when Arthur's breathing steadies further, becoming more regular, more anchored, the air around them seems to release a tension that had been held since the first doubt was spoken at the ceremony. And Whitaker kneels again, his voice calm as he speaks Arthur's name once more, slower this time, allowing the sound to settle, to be recognized, and Arthur's eyes, still adjusting, shift toward him, not sharply, not with full clarity, but with enough awareness to acknowledge that he is no longer alone. And Whitaker gives a small nod, not as a command but as reassurance, a quiet signal that everything has changed from what Arthur might remember, and that he is safe, that he has been found. And the team begins to prepare for movement, equipment brought forward with care, each action designed to support without overwhelming. And through it all Rex remains still, his presence a constant line that does not waver. And when Arthur's hand moves again, more certain this time, finding Rex's fur with a faint but deliberate motion, the connection settles deeper, anchoring him to the present in a way that no instruction could achieve. And Whitaker watches it, understanding that this bond has done more than guide the search. It has held Arthur through whatever distance lay between then and now. And as they begin to lift him, carefully, slowly, ensuring that every movement is supported, every shift controlled, Rex steps back only slightly, enough to allow space, but not enough to break contact entirely, his gaze never leaving Arthur's face. And the journey back begins not with haste, but with quiet determination, each step taken with awareness of what has been regained. And as they move out of the hollow and back toward the rise, the landscape feels different, not because it has changed, but because its meaning has. It is no longer a place of uncertainty. It is a path that led them here, a path that will now carry them forward. And Whitaker walks beside the team, his mind already moving through the next stages, the communication that must be made, the correction of records, the careful unfolding of a truth that will need to be understood beyond this field. But he does not rush ahead of the moment. He remains present, grounded in the quiet reality that stands before him. And when they reach the vehicles, the engines already prepared, the doors opened with care, the transition is smooth, controlled, and Arthur is settled with the same precision that has marked every step of this process. And Rex follows without command, stepping into place as if he has always known where he belongs, positioning himself close enough that Arthur can feel him, can sense that the presence which never left is still there. And as the convoy begins to move once more, the landscape passing slowly beyond the windows, the mist lifting further to reveal clearer lines of distance and shape, the silence within the vehicle holds a different weight now, not heavy, not uncertain, but steady, grounded in something that has been restored. And Whitaker glances toward Arthur, noting the small shifts, the gradual return of awareness, the way his gaze moves, not searching, but recognizing. And when Arthur's eyes settle again on Rex, there is a quiet understanding there that does not need to be spoken, a recognition of the path that has been followed on his behalf. And Whitaker turns his attention forward once more, the road stretching ahead, not as a question but as a continuation, because what has been uncovered here is not just a correction of error. It is a reminder that some truths do not fade simply because they are overlooked, and some bonds do not weaken with distance. They endure, waiting for the moment they are needed most. And as the convoy carries them away from the place where doubt was replaced with certainty, the story moves forward, not toward an ending, but toward a return, shaped by trust, guided by something that never failed, and held together by a presence that refused to accept what was easier to believe. The journey back does not feel like a return to where they began. It feels like stepping into something that has been waiting quietly for its moment to unfold. And as the convoy moves through the soft gray of the morning, The world outside begins to regain its shape, the fields widening, the roads becoming clearer, the mist lifting just enough to reveal the ordinary lines of life continuing beyond what has just taken place. And inside the vehicle, the atmosphere remains steady, grounded in a silence that is no longer heavy but reflective, and Captain Whitaker sits with a composed stillness, his gaze occasionally shifting toward Arthur Hayes, noting the gradual strengthening of his presence, the way his breathing has settled into a more natural rhythm, the way his eyes open more fully now, adjusting to light, to motion, to the reality of being found, and Rex remains close, positioned beside him with the quiet assurance of something that has fulfilled its purpose yet chooses to remain, his head resting lightly near Arthur's arm, his body relaxed but attentive, and when Arthur's fingers move again, more certain now, tracing the familiar line of fur beneath them, there is a sense of grounding that spreads through the space, as if that single point of contact anchors everything else in place, and Whitaker watches it without intrusion, understanding that what is happening here exists beyond protocol, beyond report. It is the quiet restoration of something that never truly broke, and as the vehicle slows, turning through the gates of the medical facility where care awaits, the transition is handled with the same care that has marked every step since the moment of discovery. Doors opening, voices low, movements precise, and Arthur is guided out with steady support, each action measured to ensure stability, to maintain the fragile continuity of his return, and Rex follows without hesitation, stepping down onto the firm ground with a calm confidence, remaining close, his presence unbroken, and as they move inside, the environment shifts again, the scent of antiseptic replacing that of damp earth, the sounds of controlled activity replacing the open silence of the field, yet the core of the moment remains unchanged, and Whitaker pauses briefly at the threshold, watching as the team takes over, as Arthur is settled into care, as the process of recovery begins in earnest, and he allows himself a single breath, deeper than the rest, acknowledging the path that has led them here, the decisions that were made, the instinct that was trusted when doubt would have been easier, and when he steps forward again it is with a quiet clarity, his role shifting now from search to understanding, from action to explanation. Because what has happened here will need to be carried beyond this room, beyond this moment, into the structures that once declared an ending where there was none, and Rex remains beside Arthur even as the environment changes around them, his presence a constant line through every shift. And when Arthur's gaze settles on him once more, clearer now, steadier, there is a recognition that runs deeper than memory, something instinctive, something that does not require words, and Whitaker turns away then, not out of distance, but out of respect, allowing that connection to hold without observation, and as he steps back into the corridor, the quiet hum of the facility surrounding him, he knows that the story will be told in reports, in statements, in careful reconstructions of fact, but what will not be captured there, what cannot be measured or filed, is the moment when a dog refused to accept what the world had decided, the moment when instinct held firm against certainty, and the moment when that refusal led them here, to a truth that had not been lost, only waiting. And as the day begins to unfold beyond the walls, light growing stronger, shadows softening, the weight of what has been restored settles not as something extraordinary, but as something right, something that should have been all along, and Whitaker walks forward with that understanding, knowing that while the details will fade into record, the meaning will remain, carried quietly in the spaces between what is seen and what is known, where loyalty endures without question and truth waits patiently to be found. The days that follow do not rush forward, they unfold slowly, as if the world itself is careful not to disturb what has been restored, and within the quiet walls of the recovery ward, the rhythm of life returns in measured breaths and small movements, each one carrying more meaning than any grand declaration. And Captain Arthur Hayes sits by the window where the light falls soft and pale across the floor. The kind of English morning that arrives without spectacle, just a steady glow through clouded sky, and beside him, never far, Rex lies stretched along the cool tiles, his body relaxed in a way that speaks not of exhaustion but of completion. And when Arthur shifts, even slightly, Rex's ears lift, his attention returning instantly, not out of concern now, but out of habit, the kind that has been forged through years and has no reason to fade. And Arthur watches him with a quiet expression, one that holds more understanding than words could carry, because he remembers, not everything at once, not in clear lines, but in fragments that settle into place like pieces returning to their origin, the sound of a low voice in darkness, the steady presence that refused to leave, the instinct that guided him even when he could not guide himself. And now that presence rests at his side, real and unwavering, and he reaches down, his hand moving with greater strength than before, fingers brushing through Rex's fur, and the dog responds with a stillness that feels almost reverent, as if this simple contact holds more weight than anything else. And outside the room, the world continues, reports are written, records corrected, conversations held in offices where facts are measured and understood, and Captain Whitaker stands among them, his posture as composed as ever, his voice steady as he recounts what happened. But even as the details are spoken, he knows that something essential remains beyond them, something that cannot be reduced to documentation. And when he finishes, when the room settles into that familiar quiet that follows understanding, he steps away, not because his role is done, but because it has shifted, and he walks back through the corridor, past the muted sounds of the facility, until he reaches the doorway where Arthur and Rex remain, and he pauses there, not entering immediately, simply observing the stillness within, the calm that has replaced the tension of uncertainty. And when Arthur looks up, their eyes meet with a recognition that does not need explanation, and Whitaker gives a small nod, not formal, not official, but human, and Arthur returns it, the motion slight but certain, and Rex lifts his head briefly, acknowledging the presence, before settling again, content in the quiet that surrounds them. And time continues in this way, not marked by dramatic change, but by steady progression, steps taken forward without the need to look back. And when the day comes for Arthur to leave the ward, to step outside once more into the open air, it is not a grand moment. There is no ceremony, no gathered crowd, only the soft sound of gravel beneath boots and paws, the cool breeze carrying the scent of rain long past. And Rex walks beside him, not leading now, not searching, simply present, his role no longer defined by urgency, but by something deeper, something enduring. And Whitaker stands at a distance, watching them move forward, his hands resting loosely at his sides, his expression calm. And as Arthur pauses, looking out across the stretch of land beyond the facility, the same quiet understanding settles over them all, that what was found was not just a man, but a truth that refused to be silenced. And in that truth there is no need for declaration, no need for explanation. It exists in the simple fact of presence, of breath, of a bond that remained when everything else suggested it should not. And as Arthur takes another step, Rex matching him without hesitation, the world continues around them, unchanged and yet entirely different, because somewhere within it, something has been set right, not by force, not by chance, but by the quiet insistence of a creature who would not accept an ending that did not feel true. And in that